motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes for the meeting of October 6th as published.
I'll second it. Anybody else have any comments? Call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Are you here for the bone fraud?
Yeah,
Alright, we might as well start with that then.
that would be good.
Oh, I was thinking of waiting to the very end, but you wouldn't find the humor in it like I do.
No,
Alright. I understand when it got submitted, there was a request for a plan or layout of what they're doing or where they're doing it, am I correct?
So that was actually sent, the official plan was sent to me on Thursday and then forwarded to the boards and commissions office. I don't know if anybody from representing them had reviewed it or signed off on it yet. I know as of that time on Thursday, there was still a bunch of things that were being tracked down through EMS and the police department. Nobody from the police department's come down to sign it yet, but Robert Geske indicated to me that he's still working with them on finalizing the EMS plan.
Okay. And we received this about a week ago?
I would received this about a month ago.
Oh, a month
We
ago.
received the revised version about a week ago, because there was an initial both chiefs had noted a few issues that they had with the originally filed plan related to lack of officer. At first they requested that they didn't need any officers on site. Police asked them to revise that with one officer with a patrol car posted at the entrance for 4 hours, and then the EMS plan, and also the traffic and EMS plans.
this is a lot smaller race than the others. It's a new one we haven't had here before.
Okay.
And they're based out of Western Mass.
Okay. So we're gonna have a total of 1,200 people if their best guess is accurate.
Pretty small event compared to the one we had last week.
Right. Are you still looking to use similar bus parking, the Sunrise thing, okay.
But it'll just be like a couple buses type thing, not like 30.
Yeah, okay.
And that, after we vote on this, I'd like to report on the Spartan race too.
Okay.
If you guys wanted to hear how that went or anything.
Yeah, I would actually like to hear that. I guess the only question I have on this is, do we have any expectation or timeline on when other boards would actually, I've only got 2 signatures here right now.
Yeah.
The building and
Right.
Board of Health.
Yep.
So I'm just,
So, conservation and planning, they were supposed to come in at some point. I know that it had been forwarded to them to review, and at least somebody from the board make a comment on it. Their original complaint was that they hadn't received the final version of it, but I know that was received on Thursday. I didn't have any direct indication from them who would be the signatory for either of those. But I know as far as fire and EMS, Rob had said he was still working out just the final details on that, and then the police, this appeared to be the updated version of what they had discussed. So I don't know if they just haven't been able to.
And this race has
Come
no
down and sign
digs
it.
like some of the other races.
Right.
so for conservation, a lot less probably to look at.
Right.
Okay.
And pretty much it's the same trail. Any place that's near the wetlands, it's the same as it always was. So they vary it like in the pastures a little bit, but it's pretty much the same courses.
Okay. What's your
Okay,
thoughts?
I don't have any questions. I'll make a motion if we grant the approval for the race on
September 8th, I think.
Yep. And I can make that contingent on the last remaining members coming in and doing the final signatures. Make sure
Yeah.
that happens this week.
Yeah, so yeah, I just second that, modifying it to say based on approval of the other
Yep.
individuals, EMS, conservation, and police. Does planning board have? I mean, I know they got a
You know,
meeting
it's-
tomorrow night, but they don't really have something to speak on this, I'm
That's-
guessing.
Yeah, that's the kind of odd part on some of these special event permits. There's no physical I guess, when we're looking at doing revisions to it, it's kind of like the special event permit is kind of supposed to steer the applicant to say, when you come in, okay, you need, from, as far as a building sign off, well, these are the building permits that you would need. From a Board of Health sign off, these are the Board of Health permits that you need. Police department, if you're gonna close a road, that's, those perspectives. When it comes to the conservation and planning aspect of it, I can understand them wanting to be notified, but they don't physically have a permitting process to say either it doesn't apply to us or you have to follow this procedure. Because, unless there was something that said, okay, you need to file an A&R plan because you're gonna be disturbing the wetlands.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah,
Some
it's
type
kind
of
of
a. All right.
I guess they have a little less skin in the game than the other boards.
But either way, that
Or
would
just
be my
notification.
modification of the motion, so I would second that. If we have any more discussion on Bone Frog? Call for vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Good.
But yes, that would be nice. the
I'd like to
update.
report we had over 7,000 runners. Everything went really good. Thank you for letting us have the race. The police did an incredibly good job. We're getting really good at managing that amount of people. My wife did a little survey as the runners ran by the house. She asked 230 people where they were from. And we had 9 countries, including Slovakia, Croatia, Bosnia, Ontario, New Zealand, Puerto Rico, England. We had in the United States, 16 states, all the way from Texas, California, Pennsylvania, a lot of New York people from the Bronx, from New York City, an incredibly good group of people. And just wanted to report that. I didn't hear one complaint from anybody, none of the neighbors. So that's pretty amazing to double the population in the town for the day and have it run that smooth.
Agreed.
On the downside, I should have been here when you had the meeting for approval, but I wasn't. I was at a previous engagement. But I was disappointed to have you require the porta potties in the center of town. I don't think that was needed at all. Those are porta potties that we are paying for, which if the businesses in the center of town don't want people to stop, it's one click of a key and we can say there are no bathrooms available in the center of town and the Barry businesses in the center of town don't want your business. I'm required to have bathrooms as a business owner. If they choose to not let them use their bathroom in the center of town, we can make every one of those participants aware that no one is to stop in the common to use the facilities or to support the businesses. I think it's ridiculous.
You had to take that cost on instead of them?
Excuse me?
You had to take the cost on instead of them?
It's all part of the venue fee, and yes, all these fees.
Well, that's why I was asking, because they
All
put in
these-
the application, so I didn't expect you to have to incur that cost.
All these fees are, it makes it harder to get these venues, these races to come back. So if they get nickel-dimed on permits and all this kind of thing, at the end, they sit down and look at the bottom dollar and everything. And it's just a requirement that really I don't feel is needed. I went down on Monday morning and looked in those porta potties, and it looked like each one was used 1 or 2 times. They were pretty much totally clean. I'm required to have bathrooms at my facility, and if someone stops, they can use the bathroom. They have band concerts down here. Do they bring in porta potties for that? I think it's ridiculous that the town
I understand what
doesn't
you're
have
saying.
a porta potty down there all the time for people that are coming through. But Spartan shouldn't have to be flipping the bill for extra business coming into the center of town.
I get you. The weekly things, like the Sunday concerts and all that, don't compare to the potential impact of the population that your event brought to the town. You just doubled
In the
our population
center-
that day.
In the
And
center
I
of
was-
town, there was more people for the farmer's market and band concerts. The people don't come to the center that much.
And I
to
don't
watch that.
disagree, especially because a lot of them are parking at Sunshine, and getting from there to here isn't working. But the reports I was receiving is people were coming in, and at most they might buy a bottle of water just so they can use the bathroom and get out. And so they had asked me to bring it up, so I brought it up. We didn't obviously have time to have a meeting and then a follow-up meeting because of the way it hit us and the timing, so it was put out that way this time because I truly thought those 3 porta potties I thought were an insignificant cost based on the overall revenues I thought Spartan was expecting to receive. So I didn't think it was a heavy lift. So I didn't think it was really a large imposition on them, or I wouldn't have asked. And I was asked by others about it, so that's why I brought it up. It wasn't just a thought out of nowhere where I was like, hey, why don't we do this anyway? But I did recognize I didn't see a lot of activity. So I see your point, and I would definitely take it into consideration the next time around.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions or, no?
No, thank you very much, and I'm glad it went well. It says a lot about how you also run your operations up there for it to continue to go this well, because it doesn't happen like that if the owner doesn't have a part in that.
It brings a lot to the town. I've spoken to several people that have bought houses in town because of the breweries and the races and what we're doing up there, so.
Certainly helps your neighbors with
Yeah.
parking.
Yep. Very good, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Phil. All right. We have someone stretching. You stretching?
No, no,
Oh, all right.
not stretching.
What would you like to bring up, sir?
Well, in regards to this porta potty issue, and, you know, I'm not an owner of businesses down in the center of town, and I'm a resident here. And I think generally the center of town businesses aren't getting the kind of support that they'd like to get. Like there's a couple of stores down there that there's another, there was a Subway here at one time. Now, I've never heard in my entire life where a Subway doesn't get supported. But what I think that you guys have just done in regards to the porta potty issue, I don't know, but you made the center of town almost less desirable when there's millions of people here, and I think you need to foster the growth in the center of town, and when there are millions of people here, I think just slapping their hands and tell them that they can't go to the bathroom here or go in for ice cream or something because there's no porta potty, and then bring all the business up the street, it's not very helpful to the people.
Those porta potties were intended to help the business on the
Yeah, right,
common.
but for some reason, he's complaining that he's gonna pay for it. right? Well, Phil was complaining he's gotta pay for the porta potties. So if you take the porta potties out, they're not gonna be there. And we just had a Subway close up because they couldn't get business. So doesn't that tell you anything? Doesn't that say
It's a
something?
balance we gotta work through.
Doesn't that say something that there's a disconnect that in the town, and then, so now he's saying, what, unless I didn't hear correctly, he's saying that he doesn't want, he or his company, or the companies, or whoever supplies the porta potties, don't wanna supply the porta potties for the center of town during that period of time, because it becomes too expensive. And, considering that they had 7,000 people, I don't know how much money that people pay to join the race. I don't know if it's $200 or $20, I really don't know. But clearly, let's assume it's $100 for fun, that's $70,000, is that correct?
No, $700,000.
Well, 700, that's even better.
They had 7,000 people racing. If it was $100 a person, that'd be
It's
$700,000.
$700,000. You did good at math, didn't you?
That was the one thing I did good, but it didn't last long.
So anyway,
There's not
so
much
it's-
left.
So it's $700,000. Now, if those folks who are pulling in now I don't know where all the money goes. I have no idea the separation of the funds. I don't know how much the lessee gets or how much the individual providers get or whatever it is. But if the $700,000, how much is a porta potty? $100 a day? Would you say?
Not too expensive.
$200 a day?
No, that was the point I made. Is I
No, but
didn't
let me
think it
ask
was.
you, how much are they? I don't know. Anybody know?
No, I think you're right. At most, it's like $100 a day.
So times, that's $200 a day, they're pulling in $700,000. 1% of it is $7,000, right? So we're talking about less than 0.1% to put a couple porta potties in there. That might make it easier for the center of town to have some sort of business, considering the fact Subway just got up and left. So
I think Subway left though because it was 2 blocks from 2 other sandwich shops. It was hard to maintain a regular clientele when you had all the variety within 2 blocks. But I do understand the general idea of it's hard for them to have business.
You understand the concept. Maybe what you need to do is a thought, I mean, I don't wanna upset anybody. Sometimes I'm pretty vocal and I am upsetting people, but it's not my intention. But maybe the town needs to plug in a certain percentage of something for these incidentals that could be negatively affecting our business. Now, I don't know if the sandwich shops and all the businesses down in the center of town are benefiting from 7,000 people coming into town. We don't know this, and it would be maybe a good thing to find out whether, and if they aren't benefiting, maybe we had to figure a way how to make them benefit. Maybe we need to help them to benefit, because it's just hurting. Over there, it's helping the company, it's helping the proprietor, it's helping the landowner, but it's negating the center of town. Now, I know people get paid for parking, God bless them. They have a liability issue with all that stuff, but I just feel badly for the center of town when I saw the Subway go, because that means, to me, that means declination, or declining business. Whatever it is, whichever avenue it goes through, it's declining, and we can't afford to decline our business in town. That's all. So,
I agree with that. And we got to look for ways to.
and I'm sticking to it.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. By the way, have you had the time when you asked for people's input? Is that?
No,
You
we
have
can
that
do
one?
that now.
Okay, because I've got a couple of things I want to share with you.
We'll open it up to public comment. Somebody have something?
You bet. I have a couple of things, and I thought that I was gonna get some help from some department heads that I discussed this with, but they're not here. Maybe they're coming afterwards, I don't know, but I guess I'm all alone and.
Well, if it's public comment, all we really are gonna get into to some degree
Right,
is
but I'm just
a
letting-
headline.
Right, I'm all alone and I'm here. We had, myself and many department heads, department heads in this town, have always communicated about the town meeting and how the fact that the schools, the location of the time that the schools get their budget approved on the warrant, is that the term?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, on the warrant, there's a listing of when the schools get approved. And people seem to think that the school's budget, which happens to be the biggest budget of the entire town, get approved maybe, or get discussed, maybe in the middle of the period of time, between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock, maybe in the middle. And then what happens, and you guys all know, and I've seen it myself, and these department heads that for some reason didn't make it today commented also, is that the people who are interested in the school stuff, as soon as the school is done, this year was like $3 million or something like that. As soon as that's done, they're out, they're history. And then I saw specifically, and this is where I'm commenting, the Public Works Department was towards the end of the warrant, and they were discussing, and first of all, there was no discussion about the school budget. I mean, there was not even a peep for $3 million. Not even a whisper. The Public Works Department, they gave him some difficulty trying to, the Finance Committee and someone else gave him some difficulty regarding choosing some sort of a stainless steel dump body versus a regular kind of steel dump body. And we actually had discussion about those two things. Comparing and contrasting these two things. And then I'm comparing and contrasting the Public Works Department and the school, and I'm saying something doesn't make sense because we should be thinking about where we can save 2% on the $3 million instead of busting this department's balls, excuse me, for a dump body, the difference between $50,000 and $60,000. It doesn't make sense. The logic of the discussion didn't make sense. I think maybe we should put the school budget at the end so that the people who are interested in the school, when they get their budget, at least they stay there. At least they pay attention, because they don't really pay attention. So that's my thought in that regard. It's a thought of other people, but they're not here. Hopefully they're gonna see this on TV and then they say, damn, I told Sam I was gonna be there. I forgot. So I'm hoping they come next week and they, or next time, and they say, they support this direction. The second thing is that maybe I'm behind the times, and sometimes I am, but I just had the opportunity of reading the police department's 5-year plan and progress report. I don't know if you guys have read it.
I'm familiar with it. I can't
Mhm.
recite it to you though.
Oh, well, I just read it. Let me tell you, I was impressed. I just want you to know, I read it and marked it up and went through everything and put my circles and arrows and all sorts of stuff. And I just want to say that we're doing good. Thank you for the police department. That's all I'm saying. So, and I also want to say is that I want everybody to be aware that not everything I say is is picking apart an existing process. I can also say, like I have just said for the police department, that when I read this, I said, wow. So, good job.
All right, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I agree. You can say something that you think needs to be said, and not always, right, it's not always negative things that will always be said from the same person.
And I really hope we can help the people in the center of town. I hope we can do something, especially
We're working on it.
with 7,000 people.
But we also have a private organization, the Business Community of Barry, that's working with all of them together too to try to, and that's really where they're gonna find their strength, is working with their fellow vendors and their fellow business, because they're gonna figure out how to work together. The people in the center of town that have businesses, people in South Barry with businesses, the people down at the IGA, they can work also with Carter Stevens and Stone Cow Brewery, and they can develop a plan where they can say, you know what, when we have a big event with 7,000 people, could we do this? And it's gonna work a lot better if they work together like that, rather than the government stepping in saying, could you work with them to do this for them? And we do have a business community of Barry now that really is the place for that to work, so that the government doesn't get in the way, because that's what we'll do. Like that porta potty thing, for all I know, we were getting in the way versus actually helping. So they need to work their own bridges. But at the time, we have a role and we can still speak up for people. But that may have not have helped. Obviously, somebody that runs it up there didn't really appreciate it. But that's something that probably would move forward. I'm not overly worried about that, because that's a whole different, I got you.
Good.
But between the business members down here that may feel that way, they can in the future maybe work through the business community of Barry and see if they can work with members up there and say, is this something we could do? Is there a balance? Or maybe could we reroute the bus route? Or could we do this instead of going down 62 and up to the parking down 62 and then coming back on Sunrise, maybe do it in reverse. Now they're coming up 62, look, we could have a bus stop at the Common and then continue, drop them off, but now they know there's always a stop at the Common, so if they didn't need to get their car, they could just get in the bus and stop at the Common. But this has got to be something where it's actually, the businesses on the Common got to want that. You know, they got to feel there's a need and convince the people that are managing the bus route that this is worth it. I'm not going to win that, even as a liaison. You're not going to be able to put enough information in front of me that I could pass to them to say, this is a worthy cause. It's really got to be the different owners starting to work together and say, what can we do to help each other? So that's my suggestion, kind of with you, but I do believe if you have that feeling of limited government as part of your internal being, then that's how you work it. You kind of put it back on the neighbors to start working together again and figure out how to make that work.
So is this community, is that a pretty strong group?
It's been solid for a year, and they just re-voted their president, vice president, treasurer type roles. They're moving into another strong year and trying to grow and continue to grow. So I think it's on the upswing. But they are established, is what I would say. They're established now. They're really trying to create something. They did the Barry Family Fun Day, which was on the Common. Similar concept, helping the businesses on the Common.
As a town, I think we need if they're the governing agency, so to speak, for businesses, I think that the selectmen need to give them whatever kind of support that they require, so that on these days, when there's $700,000 up there, and there's 50 cents over here, somebody says, something doesn't seem right, that's all.
And I understand what you're saying, but you also got to be careful there, because
I don't know the answer of this unless the government initiated a per person fee or something, or added ticket fee, or added something to sort of help us out. I mean, I don't know the finances for this organization and how it works, but if somebody complains, if a business collects $700,000 and complains about $200, something doesn't seem right, and Subway moved out of town. That's all I can say.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay,
There's a
good.
part of me though that, and I'm only saying,
And it's
they
not-
develop
Yeah,
this whole program they're doing up at Carter Stevens and Stone Cow Brewery. They put in the effort, they do the networking, they make the calls, they take the risk, they do all of that.
by the way, I'm not supporting either
So
one.
it's hard for me to sit here and say, someone else should benefit from your work.
No, but
So
but you
that's why
can't-
I'm saying let them talk to
I'm not
them
saying
and figure
someone
out
should
how they can
benefit.
help each other.
But you can't, you shouldn't, as a town person, remember now, you shouldn't make it difficult. Maybe you need to ask all the people who have businesses down there, ask them during this time when there's a lot of business on the other side of town, are they negatively affected? Maybe they're not. Maybe they do well. Maybe they're singing and dancing. Maybe they don't care about the porta potty. I just thought that,
The word I heard is they get plenty of business to the point that they needed the porta potties. They were getting the traffic. It's much more than their regular daily. So I don't think they're hurting, but I also don't know how much more they can handle. That's the other part of it. So we aren't a big town. And so for us to bring 7,000 people in on a day, we don't even have public restrooms we could say we would open. That's why it became porta potties versus, yeah, send them to this place for the restrooms. You know, like in Worcester, you go to a park, they got public restrooms at a park. Things like that. You can even put on your permit, I need use and access to, and they'll give you exclusive use to those public restrooms for an event. We don't have that. So we've got to look at other alternatives right now, and that's the direction. But I think in general, that bigger picture has got to be grassroots. It can't come from people like us sitting at a desk or at a table saying, it's got to be the members of the community have got to work together and say, this is what we want to do. And our role really is, how do we make sure we just don't take advantage or walk over or take away other people's freedoms in the process? So maintain safety, things like that. That's how I see the role of the special permit. It's more just to maintain safety and make sure adequate needs are provided, not to figure out how to balance different business interests and helping each other out. I do go to the business community of Barry meetings when I can get to them. And I was at the last one, and they're still trying to grow. And we talked about the Economic Development Committee, which is actually on the agenda tonight. That Economic Development Committee we're trying to create would be the role of the government working with the different communities, but it also works at a different level. That's kind of like, we can maybe look at developing a certain neighborhood, and can we find certain grants through the state that might help, and can the Economic Development Committee be part of that liaison process, so the private sector may not realize there are grants available, but if we can extend it out to them and say, hey, what's your plan? So there's different roles where the government can step in, and then there's different roles where it's really got to be the people saying we want to do this together. And so that's what I would encourage first, is that, and use the business community of Barry as that first step. That's just my recommendation and where I come from.
I'm glad it's become, I'm glad that it's been discussed, so that some people on TV might listen to it and may understand that these things have been considered and discussed, and, because we all want Barry to grow.
Yep.
I just don't want the, when I saw Subway go, I just felt badly for the person who owned Subway.
Yeah.
Because no doubt there was an investment. and badly for the town of Barry, because I thought Subway is like milk. It's just like milk and ice cream. It's
I know what you mean.
uh,
And we've got to look at things are going to change though, but hopefully we got the Ice House Pub hoping to start up, I believe, down by the IGA. We got that hot dog place that just opened up. So I don't like anything going away, but if one goes and two come, it's still moving forward in the right direction. Let's just hope we can keep that up and see what works. And don't get me wrong, I'd prefer an Ice House Pub and a hot dog place locally or at least regionally locally owned versus a franchise any day of the week. And I'm not knocking Subway. I think they still had good food, but if we could have a local owner have a similar, that would be better than a franchise in my opinion, because they have more control over their product.
was Subway owned by someone in this town?
I'm not saying that the owner didn't own the franchise.
Oh, I mean, I don't know.
That's not what I meant, because I don't know who the owner of that Subway franchise was. So I don't know if they were local or not.
Because if it was a local person, and for some reason, something caused the business to not prosper, then it would be damaging us again. If it's a franchise and it comes in from California, then of course you care a little less, but you do care that.
Well, I still care to see
something
the
like
degradation of our economy. I
Yeah,
agree with that.
Right, that's a good point. Degradation of our economy. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I hope more people listen to it on TV.
And I agree with that. I do like the discussion does help spread the word.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
You're welcome. With that said, if possible, I would like to move on to the Economic Development Committee, the charge, and see if we're okay with it, as it was kind of redrafted, whatever, last week. We sent out some copies of a draft. I do know that Greg had one comment, and I think you mentioned, Charlie, also, was my revised recommendation was to have 5 members instead of 7, but I think
Oh, yeah.
Greg mentioned, and you also agreed, maybe to have 2 alternates,
Yeah.
just to make sure they could keep a quorum,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
which I'm completely fine with if we wanted to kind of add that into that top paragraph somewhere. I just wrote like 2 alternate members would be, my notes here, I'm not, would be appointed on an annual term whose role is to participate but only have voting rights when necessary to maintain a quorum. So they're pretty much full participants, they just can't vote on whatever that committee would choose to vote on. But outside of that, I know Greg's not here. He did say last week that he seemed to be okay with it. But what I would like to do is see if we can move forward with approving this, maybe with just adding that one sentence with the 2 alternates. And get it posted so people could start applying to be on it. But we can revisit when Greg comes back in the next couple weeks in the next meeting. And if he's still okay with it, great. If not, we always have the right to revise it and repost it and say this is how the charge is today. So if he's okay with it, great. I'm not trying to run past him, but I'm just trying to get it out there so people know we're looking for this, because we got the regional planner and all that starting already. What are your thoughts, Charlie?
I would agree with that. And I'd make a motion that we move forward with this, and subject to another quick review at the next meeting when
Okay.
Mr. O'Sullivan is back.
Okay. So approved today, but knowing we're gonna revisit.
Yeah.
Okay. I second
And that way
that
it'll get
motion.
started.
All right. Perfect. Call for a vote? Aye. Did anybody have any questions on this, or it's gonna get posted probably on Facebook and the town website so people can see it. We're primarily creating a group of 5 regular members, 2 alternates, to work with our regional planning, no, regional economic planner
Economic
coordinator that Hardwick got through a grant, that Hardwick, New Braintree, Barry, Hubbardston?
Yes.
Is there another town in
Okay.
there? and OCAM are all gonna share on trying to figure out regional concepts that would help all of our economies. But also, we got a grant to start the process of developing an economic plan for the town of Barry on its own. I believe, and I think the board kind of believes, wouldn't want to speak for him though, that the Economic Development Committee would work with both, helping with CMRPC in developing and working with the town administrator as a liaison, helping to build the Barry Town Plan, economic plan, and working with our regional economic development coordinator, but also working with the business community of Barry. I want this to grow into something that's not a short term. I want it to be a regular, recurring, continuing thing. I'm looking for them to work towards understanding potential grant resources. Maybe they have certain liaisons they can work with, or people they know, or networking. We put a lot on our town administrator to try to keep up with all grant opportunities, and the truth is they can't keep up with probably more than 15% of the opportunities that might cross their desk. They do their best, but there's a million grants out there, and the more people that can help you, the better off you got.
Let me tell you, you put on a lot on this guy, and he's losing all his hair.
Yeah, we warned him that. He took it all off before he even started. It's like, well, if that's the case, I just...
A little less pain.
But, so when it comes to that, we need people that really want to help this town move forward economically, but it needs to come from the town. So we don't want to be throwing economic opportunities at the town that the town doesn't want. So that's kind of what this committee is also going to be about, is another resource for people in the town to meet this committee, speak their mind about what they think will work, help us build a bigger town involvement. It's really critical, because everything they can help us do to prosper or get grants or move in a good direction with regional economic agreements is going to help us reduce our costs, town tax appropriations annually, or it's going to increase our revenues because of increased economic opportunities for businesses, and we can turn those back into getting better roads, better water, better sewer, other infrastructure upgrades that we need. Truth is, your budget almost will never shrink unless you truly cut programs in your town. You're not going to save money by cutting the budget. We've got to do it by increasing revenues. For an example, CPC, that's one revenue alternative that we can now get that will help offset certain costs in the budget that we couldn't offset before. We're looking for more of those things. It doesn't have to be that industry, but more economic development will only help the town. This is a very critical committee moving forward in my mind that's really going to help this town do just that. So I'm taking the time to really speak about it because, like you said, people on TV hearing this, I'm hoping they understand how important these roles are. If you get into a huge budget like Worcester, they pay people to do this. We can't afford to pay people to do this, but because they have those people there, they're constantly the first person at the door at a grant, trying to get that grant before anybody else, because they've been there long enough, they know who to call and what time of year to call them. So they're on the list and they're ready to go. And they're already planning next year's plan this year, so that by the time it's time to apply, in order to do that, we need more than a town administrator and a town administrator's assistant to put that time in. And we really don't have that type of overhead in our government. We can't afford it. So we need people that are willing to volunteer and help us get to that level. That's my soapbox. I'm done with that one. Do you have anything more, Charlie?
No?
All right. We called for a vote, right?
Yeah, you come for a vote.
All right then. Done. We still only have the 2 people on the transfer study apply?
That's all we have.
All right. I really, I don't want to get started on that until we can get some more applications, but it's we really need people that are willing to take some time to look into this and help. Otherwise, the select board will have to start making some decisions without input from a transfer station study committee. Again, it's another thing where people have the time and they can commit. This is a short-term committee. It's not intended to last years. It's supposed to just get us through a point of deciding whether it's financially viable to insource management of the transfer station or continue to bid and have a management company take care of it. And our understanding is for those that use the transfer station, we can reduce that cost with some preliminary big picture numbers, not getting into the details of how we could insource it. We could reduce permit fees or other costs if we ran it ourselves versus the way we've got it under our current contract with Solid Waste Solutions. That's me speaking. I'm not speaking for Charlie. I'm not speaking for Greg. I'm just saying, based on what I've heard, I believe that's a possibility. We wanted some more help to really make sure we were looking at true numbers and have a realistic understanding of the potential. So please, anybody interested, pick up a Town of Barry appointment application and get on the landfill transfer station study committee. It's not a landfill, so it's transfer station.
Is there any kind of grants available, study grants available, that we could focus towards this transfer station? That we may, or is that something that the accountant, who knows all the numbers anyway, can perform a service, a fiscal service, and let the selectmen know the bottom line numbers, and we have these people write in. If it's a grant, we can get it, if there is a grant. If we can get our accountant or our treasurer or someone in that division to do the numbers, then we've got the answers right away instead of having to ask for a committee to make a decision. That's just a thought.
I think we can look to see if there's a grant opportunity. Our accountant wouldn't have a lot of numbers because it's completely outsourced, so we don't have the details and the numbers of costs and revenues. That's
Didn't you have the numbers
Solid
for
Waste Solution.
management? Didn't you have, when Waste Management hit, didn't?
It was all private. We didn't have to.
You didn't have anything, huh?
My understanding is we didn't have any funding going in and no funding coming back, so we didn't know the numbers on that. And we don't have a contract relationship that causes them to have to open up those numbers and show us.
And there's no kind of transfer station consultant that we can scrape together for some money for, and let these people know.
Well, there is some consultant. I mean, the Board of Health uses, why did I just, Mark Popham. He's done a lot when it came to the landfill and also the transfer station and how the Board of Health reviews of regulatory, but he's also been in the business for many years, so he has his own history of it and understanding.
Maybe he'd be a good go-to person.
It's possible. We've asked the Board of Health if they would be interested in having him provide information to help us. They seemed okay with that, like they would. I mean, because it's their consultant, so they'd have to say, yes, please spend your time that we're paying you on this or that. I think his role in being involved was waiting for this committee to be developed, and then this committee would reach out to him and say, could you help us with some of these numbers or this? I think he was still going to act more of as a consultant to the committee, so the committee was still doing the work of pulling it all together. He would have just been one of the resources that would have grabbed info. I know other people have reached out to other different neighboring towns, or not even neighboring. Like Groton was one of the towns that were referenced that runs their own transfer station, and how do they do it and make it so that they not only don't lose money, but apparently are able to bring in enough money to either put into a capital account to keep up or somehow create revenue. I'm not sure. I know the town of Hardwick runs a recycling transfer station. They can't do solid waste, but they do recycling. I know I talked to the town administrator and one of the selectmen in the town of Hardwick. They said they might be interested if we opened up the Berry transfer station to non-residents, letting their residents know, and then they can come up and buy a permit just like all we did. We are only using, from my understanding, 20% of our capacity at the transfer station with just Perry residents. So if we opened it up to Hardwick, New Braintree, Oakham, other towns as a regional concept, we might be able to sell, rather than 1,200 permits, maybe we can be pushing 1,700 if you add 3 other towns in that end up wanting to use it. If it's $700, I mean, if it's $100 a permit at that time and there's 500 more people, we can do the math, but I kind of did it before. I think that puts us at 500, 100, that's 4 zeros. That puts us at 50,000. 50,000 is a huge add to what we were looking at prior, to the point that we thought we could take that $100 permit and bring it down to maybe 75 and still stay afloat with what we thought would be the cost. But that was, again, high level without really looking at all the details and knowing that some of the recycled markets, the resale of the recycled materials, is on a downward trend, at least for plastics. But they've also been known to go down and up, down and up. So we wanted someone that understood that more to be able to provide more input on this committee, give this committee some information so they can put it together and say, here's historical, here's what new regs seem to imply, this is where it looks like it's going. That would help us. Andrew's doing his best, but he doesn't have the time to do that, and then again chase all the other grants, deal with payroll, personnel, every other thing he's doing. That's why we need this committee. Or we got to start paying people. And a lot of the grants you get are almost a shared grant. They'll give you 50% of the amount of money that you're willing to put up as a town. So even that means we would have to pay somebody to do this if we couldn't get people to volunteer. So grants sometimes still require somebody else to put in the effort, and they don't just count hours worked. Sometimes they need actual money proven in the investment.
You know, there was an organization that came in I was really impressed with. They helped us develop something called the Capital Plan.
The Collins Group.
Collins Group. And I spoke to them, and maybe there's a connection within that group that might assist us in making a determination, because they seem to be very professional.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's definitely possible. You definitely need to know what you're asking of them, though, because if you don't ask the right questions, they don't know what you want. And so you won't necessarily get the answers you're looking for. And you got to be careful if you're paying someone for that, because every time you ask a question, eventually it's going to be like, I gave you everything you paid me to give you. And
Yeah, but
it
I
just
thought
came
they
down
were-
to you didn't know what to ask for.
I thought they worked for no charge for the town.
Nope, those were also funded through grants.
Oh, really?
We got a grant that we paid the Collins Group to do the capital.
Oh,
Then we got a grant that we paid the Collins Group, and maybe even through CMRPC, to do the school municipal shared resources. Now it's called QEMP, but it was something before that, I forget. But that was all grant funded, so people are still getting paid to help us. They're not volunteering their time. And they're getting paid right along the same level of the industry. They're not a non-profit just trying to get by. They're paid well. Not to say they don't need to be. That's not what I'm implying. So anyway, that's all I had to say on this. We were thinking what, possibly tabling this until we get more applications. Is that what you thought?
I thought at least until
Or until Greg gets back?
back from vacation, and then we do it and we get them started, and if another one wants to come on, if we wanted, they're prepared to go for this spring, they gotta get moving.
Yeah.
There isn't, you know,
Okay, so.
time marches on.
So let's table this for when Greg comes back at the next meeting. We'll just add it to the agenda right away for that. All right, the one I'd like to bounce back to now would be the marijuana bylaws. I had asked for this to be on the agenda. I've had some thoughts on this. It started with some things I had heard based on, well, following the town meeting. People had asked about the marijuana bylaw. They had asked about how can we get the right bylaw passed, what's it gonna take. I've had people talk about, is everything related to marijuana a zoning bylaw outside of prohibition, which was not a zoning. So in reviewing that and thinking about marijuana as a business, I felt like what we presented in front of the town was taking two different aspects of the marijuana businesses and trying to squeeze them all under the planning board. And I feel like there's a part of that actually that is the Board of Selectmen. And the reason I say that is the Board of Selectmen deals with all of our business licenses in town. We approve the alcohol licenses, we approve victuals licenses, inn holder licenses. So licensing is our jurisdiction. Zoning is the planning board. So what I'd like to do is, my plan was to go to the planning board tomorrow and suggest that they focus on revising their marijuana bylaws to be strictly based on zoning and not special permit granting authority, because I don't believe special permit granting authority would fall under their standard jurisdiction for a business. They don't go and tell a pizza shop what they can and can't do when they ask to have a business. They set the zoning and that's it. So there's a standard signage, there's a standard whatever you're gonna have for a business, but once you set it, they don't have to come back to the planning board and say, now can I have the pizza shop? The planning board is more about that, setting up certain rules and letting it run for a long time. I know they got into special permit granting authorities on solar. That really isn't a business because people aren't coming to share in the use of the solar on at your house. It's not a business that would normally get a business license. There's no licensing or certification to have solar. There are different regulations involved, but it has nothing to do with, can I have it on my site? Massachusetts also really pushed solar so that there was much more difficult for a planning board to write zoning to meet also the community's desires aesthetically. So they had to kind of create their special permit granting authority for that use. With marijuana businesses in town, I believe it falls under the Board of Selectmen, and I think it's also being fair to the business looking to do it in this town. If a business comes before this town and wants to have a marijuana license of any sort, the first thing they have to do is come to the Board of Selectmen and get a host community agreement. Once they get that, then they go back to the state and go through all of that application process, and all of this includes fees and investments. I don't believe it's fair to a developer or somebody interested in owning a marijuana facility of any sort to come before the Board of Selectmen, get a host community agreement that is only reviewed primarily based on how much money you're going to give us, and maybe a couple small criteria like we put in the CPC, because we had no bylaws at the time when we had theirs. We agreed to limit no retail on site. We limited certain things in that host community agreement because we paid attention. We had a couple meetings. We pulled in the community. We got the community's input under the host community agreement to identify what that business could or couldn't do at that site in order to get the host community agreement. I believe that's the proper place to pull in all of the things that the planning board was trying to put under a special permit granting authority with their criteria that would allow them to alter certain things based on what they're trying to present in the zoning bylaws to be specific to a use in a certain neighborhood compared to use in another neighborhood. I personally believe that would fall under us. I don't believe they actually might survive a bylaw that went through like that, because it really would be considered subjective and it might not even make it through the Attorney General's office. Or a court case after, despite what the Attorney General says, and they still fight you on it, and you can still lose that. And now all of a sudden they're actually allowed to do what they're doing without any regulation, depending on how far that goes. So what I am going to propose is they work on the zoning, the Board of Selectmen work on a bylaw that identifies the process of the host community agreement and what we would include, and whether we would include certain minimum public hearings, times between, so that anybody coming to this town saying, I would like to do business in this town, already knows the path that it would have to take going through us. Just so that once they get the state approval and it all comes through, they're not coming back to sit and once again wonder what this town is gonna ask them to do after that. So I wanted to bring that up now. I didn't know what your thoughts on that, Charlie, are. But I think that it really is two separate roles that each board has. And I think what we really need to be asking of a potential business owner needs to be brought up early in the process, so they're not investing money and then come to the planning board and feel like they've invested too much, now they just got to do whatever they're told just so they can finally get their business running.
No, I think you're right. I've been trying to follow what's going on with the Cannabis Control Commission, and they haven't finished their regulations yet, which is a kind of a problem, but I'm assuming it's going to be similar to like alcohol or something like that. We issue a license and it's a permitted use in certain zones and whatever.
Right.
And I don't know if we can do that yet, given the fact that they haven't fully approved the regulations.
I think there's certain areas that they haven't completely set, but I think like the testing facility, they're about to approve one based on the regulations in place, similar to, I think, retail cultivation. They got some of those in play, but I think the concerns about delivery and social consumption are still things that are up in the air. They don't know what to do with. Social consumption, obviously, we prohibited. The delivery prohibition didn't seem to benefit the town. It just pretty much said that anybody not in town can still deliver in town. So I think that's still got a lot to do on the state level of what they're gonna require.
Yeah. But I do think we need to establish, you're correct, some criteria if we actually have to issue the license.
Right.
I
And
assume that's what you're actually driving at, is coming up with a policy and,
exactly.
yeah.
You know, we get you know, the bylaw might be something that's just as simple as, you know, any company or developer interested in having a marijuana facility has to go through a host community agreement process per established policy by the Board of Selectmen. And then we can then create the policy and make sure it's posted at the time, but it's a lot easier to tweak the policy as we learn more and do better down the line. Because we should give them, you know, these are the 5 things that we're gonna consider. You know, one might be the cost to the town. One might be, you know, the architectural compatibility with the neighborhood. One might be, you know, public input, you know, your abutters, what's their concerns, what their thoughts. One might be security. But these are things we could put in under a host community agreement that I don't think would be something that necessarily fits into a zoning or a planning board.
Right.
Because host community agreement is a negotiated contract.
The biggest thing is that right now, I believe that the state has a cap gross revenue. That's basically.
Right, so we can't change that,
Right.
but so the money coming in could be 3%, or we could say, you know, what, we'll accept 2% if you put a 10-foot high privacy fence, not a chain link fence around it.
I think one thing that we have to consider, you know, since the town basically went to town meeting and made it that, you know, they will have the ability to have retail sales, is to make sure that the town can pick up the 3% tax revenue, local tax revenue option for any retail establishment that comes in. I think that's gonna be the biggest thing that we need to make sure that gets passed. That might be a town meeting vote.
Well, I don't think we should put that as a bylaw vote saying, get the max.
Well, 3% town tax revenue. So
That's determined in the host community agreement.
there's two different things with the retail sales though. There's the 3% gross sales, that's basically, you know, kind of like the offset cost. So your impact cost, when we're, you know, some communities might go between 1 and 3% based on, but the town has the option of also putting on a 3% sales tax on all the recreational sales, not
See-
cultivation.
See, I thought the 3% gross was only for cultivation because
Only
you
on-
don't have the high retail return.
But on the retail side, you can go after both.
You can
Both
do the
both
3% as
3%
well as.
Yeah, both the 3% HCA and then basically a local tax option to say that we're collecting 3% gross revenue sales, similar to a meals tax or hotels tax.
Okay. Well,
We
that
just
one
can't-
would probably be the bylaw, you're right.
Yeah, so we can't go after that, you know, on the cultivation side because they don't have that gross revenue sales aspect of it, but.
So that's what we'd have to look at, and it's, cultivation actually is based on gross sales. It's just at a wholesale rate.
Right, at a wholesale rate.
But the local sales tax on retail would be,
Cause that's on top of what, the 18% that the state's taking on,
yeah,
so.
okay. But those would be things we'd have to try to get ready, and I would like to try to get these ready for this fall because our moratorium technically ends at the end of this year. So I think for us, we've got to have a bylaw that would be specific to the sales tax on retail that we have a local right to do. And then we've got to do a bylaw that would be about the process of the host community agreement. And more to that, what it is it's putting the onus on the Board of Selectmen more than it is the developer.
Right, and I'm
It's pretty
wondering-
much saying if it comes in, the Board of Selectmen shall have a minimum of 2 public hearings, properly posted per public hearing posting requirements, all that.
If we could get away with that through policy rather than through a bylaw though.
You can't hold the Board of Selectmen accountable
I'm
on the
just wondering.
public hearings if you
Right.
don't put it as a bylaw. Because
just
they can
thinking
always
because
change the policy.
Host community agreement, you know, is required under the Cannabis Control Commission for anything, so they can't even do anything without us, without them getting that host community agreement through us. So
Right.
that's just why I was thinking, you know, policy might be a good way to start.
But the host community agreement, I think at most only requires 1 public hearing.
Mhm.
That's all I meant. So that's where it's like, you can have 1 public hearing and then everybody goes, what happened? But if you put in the bylaw, we're required to have 2, at least they can hear from the first one and say, oh, I should be at the next one. That's just my thought. So I'd like to draft some of that up. I'd like to get input from the public on that, what their thoughts are. And I'm gonna go to the planning board and explain my thoughts on that, and hopefully the 2 boards can start working together to figure out how we separate the original bylaws and say, okay, this is this and that is that, and see if it'll work. I don't know. I haven't spoken to the planning board, so I wanted to bring it up here first because I didn't want to go there saying I never talked to the rest of the board or, and I know Greg's not here. It's just a start. When he comes back, we'll still revisit, see where we're at. He'll have plenty of time to have input.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the planning boards, you know, difficulties with the inputting the special permit granting authority as themselves is the fact that, you know, it's kind of that square peg in a round hole thing where, you know, I can tell that they're trying to use what other towns have adopted in creating what their bylaws are. And a lot of towns that bring in, you know, somewhat that's not a necessarily clear-cut use of a zoning district will require a lot of special permits, and having the planning board as a special permit granting authority. But the one thing that we're missing from our end is basically a test of saying that this is what goes into that special permit. This is what if you fall into all these criteria, we're gonna say yes no matter what. Right, without just saying that we're a special permit granting authority, you know, it doesn't really meet the test of, you know, say it's a little too ambiguous for an applicant. They don't have a clear set of guidelines that they have that their application's going to fall under. So, you know, unless the planning board decided to revamp the entire zoning bylaw to require additional, you know, additional uses having to get special permit, then I agree. I don't think that you can take one use and say, well, except for this use, that one use has to get a special permit, and we're going to make the decision as to what goes into the special permit.
So, and I think we can play that role. And it would be supporting them, not another way of doing it. Right. So that's what I'm hoping to present to them tomorrow and see what their thoughts are, give them a chance to think about it. I don't expect anybody to be able to say I do or don't agree right away. It'll take a little time to think about it. But we got to start thinking about it, because November will be here before we know it, and we'll all be like, oh, I wish I had a bylaw in place.
You know, as a point of information, I heard recently that the town of Winchendon approved 3 retail facilities for marijuana. Now, I don't
They may have.
I spoke to one person who has interest in that, and he mentioned it, who's also in the political realm in Winchendon, and I was just amazed, that's all. I'm not saying I was amazed negatively or positively. I just was amazed that they jumped on the bandwagon as much as they did. That's my thought. Whatever that means in the long run, right? And in 5 years down the road, we may say, boy, we're glad we didn't do that. And then we may say, boy, we missed the boat, right?
It could be either. It really could. And I understand that, and that's going to be a little the test of the state, not just each town, but the state's going to have to figure out what is this really doing? Anybody else have anything to say on that? Okay. All right. Guess we'll hit the request to use town property stuff real quick. We have a request of the Barry Historical Society to use Town Hall on October 4th from that Thursday from 6 to 10 p.m. One says lectures, and the other application for the same date and general time frame says historical program, history of Barry Fire Department. So that would be October 4th at Town Hall.
I'll make a motion that we grant permission to the Historical Society to use the town hall on October the 4th from 6 to 10 p.m.
I second that. Any comments? Call for vote.
Aye.
Aye. We also have an application from the New Life Church. Looking to use the Center Common for a family fun day that they're looking to do on. Do you know what day it is? It didn't.
Just as hard as you, so dates and times. Tell you what, might have been in her email, so I didn't
Yeah.
find it.
Okay,
Just
yeah,
I just
set up the
noticed.
event from 12 to 3. I think they missed the day.
What's the date? They don't have it down,
It's
do
not-
they?
Yeah, it's.
No,
I'm
I
just
think they
looking to
just
see from the original
overlooked
email.
it. Well, I guess
Please hold.
hopefully it's not next week. Should we call the number?
Actually, I have the exact date here. September 8th.
September 8th.
Saturday, September 8th.
September 8th. Saturday. New Life Church is looking to do something on the Center Common Family Fun Day. Hamburgers, hot dogs, and other things. Popcorn, etc. Any thoughts, comments, motions?
Okay, that shouldn't conflict with the farmer's market, September 8th.
Right.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we grant the request by the New Life Church to use the common on September the 8th from 12 to 3 p.m.
Is that the same day as the car show?
Ooh,
The Lions car show?
that might be. The Lions Club, is it the 8th?
I think it's September 8th.
What is, the car show, that's right.
Or is it the 15th? I thought it was the 8th.
They haven't sent us anything.
I think they just,
I'm
I
surprised.
saw
it's
something
him.
posted on the side of the
I'll
road
probably
or.
find out tomorrow.
Get
I
the
thought
berry.
I saw a blue brochure at the post office, and I thought it said the 8th.
I thought it said September 8th.
Yeah, I
I have to
think,
think back
now
to
that you mention
Tim
it.
putting something on the electronic sign. Now I have it with me.
Do they both want to use the same part of the common?
yes.
Oh. If one person if one group wanted to use a different part of the common.
They use the whole, it's a car show.
Oh, they do, they use the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah,
I'm unfamiliar with it. I just drive by.
you're
I-
right.
I haven't learned how to smell the roses yet.
September 8th at 9 in the morning. Very common.
Okay,
They've only gotten their approval.
withdraw my motion.
9 to 2:30. This is 12 to 3. Would have to
I'll just let them know
hold
that.
off unless it's something they hadn't told us was in conjunction with, and the Lions Club said, please share with all of us. But I don't think that's the
Yeah, I don't
case.
think so either, so I'll just let them know that they'll have to find
Yeah,
an alternate.
different time.
Yeah. Lions Club car show. Alrighty. Alright, we have a couple common victualers licenses, I believe. We have,
Send it to you, please. I think it might still be upstairs.
okay.
I got that list.
Did you get a copy of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we just have to make sure they've been checked by the building department
Exactly.
for compliance. We could do this one.
Yes, we can. We have an appointment, a wage authorization for a Miss Sandra Hood as the administrative assistant for the town.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we authorize the wage at, published on the sheet from the town administrator at $15.79 an hour for 35 plus or minus hours per week.
I second that. Call for a vote?
Aye,
Aye.
with the note that it's plus or minus.
Yes.
Knowing how those things work.
Exactly.
Welcome.
Exactly. Just wait until March, April, when all of a sudden the 35 starts creeping up. Finance committee, town meeting, all that. It's like, oh wait, we gotta do this too. We gotta do that too. Okay. Wholesome Farmers Market. Do we know what that is?
That, Berry Foods changed their name, the new owners.
Oh. Oh, man.
What's the name now?
Wholesome Farmers Market.
That's what I thought it was.
Is that for the food they cook? Is that
Yes.
what? Okay.
Yep.
All right then.
Okay, I make a motion that we grant the common victual license to Wholesome Farmers Market Incorporated, 596 Summer Street.
I second that. Call for a vote?
Aye.
Aye. Um, Similarly, we have another one, Weenie's Hot Dogs down same neighborhood, 531 Summer Street. Looking for a common victuals license to serve hot dogs through a walk-up window. I have no issues with it. I would make a motion to approve the common victual license request.
I will second. And just as a way of discussion, we have an anonymous letter here that was undated and obviously being anonymous unsigned, but just make sure the building inspector takes a look at all that.
That's the one we approved.
Are you allowed to read the anonymous unsigned letters?
It's available, we don't.
Public record.
public record.
Can you read it?
If you want it read.
I'll read it if you'd like.
Okay, Mac, we all got it.
All right. Letter was sent to the town of Barry building inspector. Board of Selectmen were copied, as well as the ADA, care of U.S. Department of Justice. I would like to draw your attention to potentially dangerous situation at a business in town. There is a new hot dog restaurant located at 531 Summer Street that does not meet the ADA regulations. I have noticed the following violations. The handicap ramp is too steep. The slope should be a 12-to-1 ratio. There should be handrails on both sides of the ramps. The area at the bottom of a handicapped ramp should be flat for a minimum of 60 inches and be as wide as the ramp. The area at this location continues to slope and wheelchairs may not be able to stop. The handicap parking spaces are on a steep incline. Also, the parking spaces are not painted. The serving window is too high for handicapped access. Please see to it that these problems are addressed for the safety of those with limited access. Thank you, Barry resident.
Unsigned.
Unsigned.
Barry resident. That's okay. So that's what we received. It's with the building inspector. They've already received it. Correct.
Yes. That's our copy was sent directly to them. So.
Okay. Other than that, what's our thoughts on the pictures license? Did we vote? Yeah, you just made the comment about this. Okay. Alright. Bandstand repair bids.
Yeah, so we had gone out to bid on this with the available funding under the remaining money under the common project. And so the total base bid on it was $32,985, and when we got that base bid, I forwarded it to the common committee and gotten a recommendation from them to award a contract. Right after that, we had a meeting on site to kind of make sure that we were still working under the same scope of work, and there was a few things pointed out by the contractor that were missing under the scope of work, and a few things that they thought might be better. So we asked for change order requests on those. The first one was some masonry work underneath or related to the stairs, because it seemed a little bit more involved than what it was originally shown as. Change order number 2 was some ceiling paint, was some paint on the ceiling and the columns that wasn't originally called out for. And then change order 3 was removal of the speakers that are currently there. But change order number 4, that was one where they basically were saying that, you know what, and the original bid we were calling out for doing like a skim, just a kind of like a skim coat of concrete to just try to seal up the holes, and then do like a paint over it. And the mason looked at it, was basically like, well, you know, that's not going to last for very long. It's going to probably start chipping after a while. He's like, I'd suggest doing this epoxy flooring. So we got the change order request back on it, and it's almost double the price of, it is double the price of what the whole base bid was. So, and then they offered a $1,700 credit, you know, by taking out the skim coating. I have floated this down to the common committee to see kind of what do you guys want to do with this. We haven't issued any contracts. We haven't on this work yet. So I mean, we still have the opportunity that we could back out if you know, if they didn't think it was worth the work. But I think, given, you know, if we just didn't accept change order number 4, but then ask for the credit to not do the skim coating on it, because in all reality, it's not, the floor itself is not in that bad a shape. I think the epoxy coating was kind of a little bit of an overkill, And if and if they don't think that a skim coat's gonna last or is gonna do the trick, why do it in the first place? That would bring the price, it'd still bring the price up a little bit from the $32,985 to $38,265. But I just wanted to let you guys know, just because I haven't heard back from the comment committee yet on how they want to proceed, but I know that the builder also doesn't want to be kind of strung along for months and months and months for the town to figure out what it wants to do on this before executing a contract. So, I guess the ball's kind of in the court of the common committee. But I just want to really keep you guys apprised of what's going on with this.
Now, we can't do changeover 4, right? Because
I don't think
you
we could
pretty much.
afford it. I don't.
Well,
think
I didn't even think you could legally
Oh, no,
under
no, I
procurement
mean,
law because
yeah,
you
legally
doubled the
under-
base bid that was bid.
Right.
Okay.
You're going. I don't think you can exceed 50%. It might even be less than that. Might be like 25%. But that would just be a gross over expenditure over the base bid.
Yeah. Okay. So
Basically, if we said, oh yeah, we really want that epoxy floor, we'd probably have to just go out and rebid for the epoxy floor to be done.
I know that I just had a couple public bathrooms completely coated with a epoxy floor for 20,000,
Yeah.
which is probably more square footage than the total of that gazebo.
Right. Yeah. And then,
So I'm thinking,
yeah.
oh, it's a change order. We're gonna
Yeah.
throw out a price and just hope they pay us.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying it wouldn't cost more, but I'd rather get more people bidding on that than just taking this contractor's number on it.
Right. Yeah. And I don't even, if you look at it, that's not where the highest, where the greatest need is. If you invest, if the rest was done without the floor being done, you'd still look like a brand new bandstand. And it could be something that you'll look at down the future if you really wanted to. But, I'm still just kind of waiting on the common committee to give me a yes or no.
The base bid included the stairs and the bulkhead?
It did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You have any thoughts, Charlie?
No,
But thanks for the initial review, so we kind of have an idea when it comes by.
Yeah, I had a feeling when they were talking about epoxy floors, it was like, I think we might be pushing the limits on our change orders.
That's the guy I work with that I think gives you a fair price.
Okay.
He's also the owner of the business, so prevailing wage, he doesn't have to count himself.
Okay.
So he's mentioned that many times to me, why his price usually is lower than his competitor.
Yeah.
Because it's him and his son.
I think he might have gotten that price. It was like a contractor getting a price from a mason who was asking for a sub-bidder's price, and that's probably why there was such a high change.
Got all that,
Yeah.
And all I'm saying is, just because that person did a good job. I don't know him for nothing. They come actually out of Maine, so I have no connection to them other than they did a job for me and it worked.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
We'll have to get 3 prices anyway if we decide that's the way to go.
Yes, unless he gives you less than 10,000 on the quote.
True.
Bandstand repair, fuel contracts.
So we did the annual bid for fuel for diesel, propane, and gas. Let's see, diesel, propane, and gas.
Number 2 fuel.
Propane, heating oil, and 22X diesel. They're pretty much all in line. RJ McDonald had the lowest overall bid for all 3 services. So EP Wine was the only other bidder on propane, and they were slightly higher. So I have two originals of each of the 3 contracts. You guys can review and decide to approve.
Did they, was propane the only one to have more than one bidder?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
What was the fuel oil cost?
I don't have
Is that backup data in here, or are these just
all
the agreements?
All the backup data is in the, I can read it off from the contract if you'd like. I just don't have I didn't have, include the tab sheet in there.
Okay. If you were to look at it. Do you know what the rates were offhand, or what the approved numbers were?
No, I don't.
Do we do this once every year?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't do 3-year contracts?
We don't. No,
Or ask for bids on that?
Could be something we'll look at in the future, but right now, or just based off of previous practice, it's been 1 year.
Yeah.
But we could look at it 3 years.
I was just curious, I'm not
Yeah.
saying it should or shouldn't be, I
Yeah.
just,
And sometimes
Looking
it's
for
almost
the
one of those
fuel.
like, damned if you do, damned if you don't, one of the kind of things. I know we do ask for both a flat rate and a market rate price.
And diesel,
this is the XX diesel.
off-road fuel, diesel is 258.9. Give a minute, Sam, I'll get there.
What about fuel oil for heating?
Number 2 propane, or number 2 heating oil.
Back up to fixed price per term is 248.9.
Right. Nice.
And that's for heating, or what
That's a
about?
floating rate.
What about for propane?
Propane?
So I see a fixed rate and a floating rate on the contract. Does that mean each building can choose which rate they're looking for?
Town usually makes the decision. I think I put fixed rate in for all of them for budgetary reasons, and
One
I mean,
$1.47
I don't
and a
see
half.
the oil rates going, the trend down.
148
So
a gallon.
I think we're
Yeah.
smart taking a fixed
From what I
rate.
hear, that's a good number,
Yeah.
148. As far as the
For
fuel oil, I
propane.
didn't know fuel oil was prices was $1 more, just as a point of information.
It,
But if there's only one bidder.
I think
then-
propane prices can be a little bit more volatile, right? They
Mhm.
can kind of go up and down a little bit more, so we might be looking at it like this. Being fixed rate, we're in a better position because it could be in November, all of a sudden it jumps to 250, and then it
Yeah.
falls back down.
So I usually bid it right in the middle of summer, try to get the lowest price, and hopefully they.
Catch their
Stay
pre-purchase plans
Yeah.
and things they do.
We need a motion on that.
Yeah, I need a motion and a signature on those tabs, please.
I'll make a motion that we award the energy contracts as per the recommendations of Andrew, Town Administrator, and what's in the packet. I guess we can do all of them at once, that might.
I second that.
I got plenty of stuff for you to
What is it,
sign,
2
so if you wanna
copies
wait till
each?
after, that's fine. Yeah, there's 2 copies of each contract.
Alright, I'll just set it there for signatures. Annual appointments, I guess, is the only thing left on the agenda.
Did you do Sandy's?
We did Sandy's.
Okay, cool.
We just didn't sign
There you go.
this one yet. That's me anyway.
Andrew, I just have one thing. I mentioned it to Sandy the other day about the telephone company's getting a little lax on their polls. I don't know who you called before, but it seemed to take care of the problem.
See what I have.
Every time I drive by that one on Worcester Road, I see it. It's the
Oh, it's just
wires.
hanging by the wires.
Yeah, the wire's holding the pole up.
That's on,
There's a few on
Charter and Verizon, not National Grid.
Yeah. it's-
Except National Grid should have done a better job taking that leftover pole and tying it to the new pole, so it actually was supported on something other than Verizon and Charter lines.
There's a couple on
Did you get a-
Winsville Road that leave a little bit to be desired.
I'll try to do a quick surveys to get some of the worst ones, but, did you get a poll number on that? Did you happen to get a poll number on that
I
poll?
can
No, I
try on
didn't.
my way, because I drive
Okay.
by it every day to work. I
Okay.
can see if I can do that and
Okay.
email it to you.
I'll
Take a
Maybe I'll
picture.
do, yes,
It
the
looked
picture is
better
really gonna
today.
help because it kind of.
It looked better today,
really puts it in
actually.
there, go, you need to take care of this, so.
Okay,
It looked a little better today. It wasn't quite as far hanging out.
okay. It's the humidity, or the lack of it. It dried up and the wires pulled it up a little bit.
Did have that on my things to do today and just didn't get around to it, sorry, Joe.
So, the annual appointments, there's a big old list of them here. The only thing I would, well, I think there was one thing for this. I would just like to, again, take
Very
you
good.
off the
Yeah.
capital planning committee on this list. As you're more the liaison with the Board of Selectmen, or finance, or all of us. Okay, when you note the 3-year, 5-year, 3-year, 1-year, is that saying that these are the only people in those particular groups or committees that are up for reappointment this year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure I better understood.
Yes, I put in some serious legwork with Alan to get this program correct, so, it should work properly now, and we did some back and forth too with the developer to make sure that we got some of the bugs out, because when we were running some of the test data, it was duplicating and triplicating some names and adding, additional terms past the 3 years. So, we put in probably a good solid 4 days worth of work to get the correct appointments in here, get them into the correct terms, and then get it to work properly, so.
Okay, perfect. There was the CMRPC delegate.
That one just popped up as far as a renewal, I just noticed that.
I know you have Phil Hubbard listed here,
Right, yeah, that was an automatic,
but do we know if he still wants it?
don't know, no.
Okay.
I did ask the planning board to recommend somebody for the alternate position, and as you said, they're meeting tomorrow night, so, I would suggest probably leaving that one off for now and then taking that up at your next meeting and seeing who you decide on.
Okay. Okay, so do we want to go through reading every name, reading each
I
committee?
don't think we need to, do you?
No. They'll be available if you want to look at the records. You can take a copy with you if you'd like for any reason.
I think I'll put all those names in.
Similarly, yes.
I would have
All
scanned
right.
it for you, but.
But yes, we're just pretty much doing our annual reappointment. Some of these will be getting 3-year terms, some will be getting 5, some will get 1. But they're generally set up based on different groups, committees, and or departments for which they work. I'd make a motion to approve the appointments listed here, less the appointment of the town administrator to the capital planning committee, and less the CMRPC commission.
I will second that, till we actually know.
Anybody have any other questions about any of these? All right. Call for vote.
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to double check though in the future, maybe, like I said, most of the full-time employees, or maybe we also wanna just look at, even the on-call fire. Talk to Bob to see if he thinks that needs to be done, or if he would just give proper notice if somebody says we're done, and he can just update the list for you.
Yeah, I know we were working to, making this software a little bit more friendly with the employees, and make it more of an employee registry to say when people are hired, when people are hired, when people are terminated, tracking pay rates and stuff like that. So that way,
kind of an all-in-one.
Yeah, so that way it's not just kind of like
calendar thing.
it's a database we look at once a year when we got to reappoint everybody, trying to make it so that way it's something that we keep moving.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I understand that. Not a big deal then. I think the one thing we have left on the agenda would be an executive session, but before we get to that, just like to see if there's any town administrator report you'd like to discuss, or?
I didn't really have too much else to report on. It's been a busy week, or a busy couple weeks since the last meeting. Sandy's been great in her first week here. I'd say really getting up to speed quick. And summer's coming to an end, so just getting ready for the for a busy fall. So.
The only other thing I'd like to say, well, actually, I'll let you go first.
No,
got anything you want to add? Okay. I would like to say, though, that we had received a resignation letter for our assistant collector, Jessica Crawford. I want to say best wishes with where she's going in her life and what her choices are. I really appreciated everything she did for the town since she's been here. The times that I had a chance to get to know her, I know there weren't a lot, but she was just very friendly, and I appreciated the way she worked with people. So thank you there. Similarly, we just got a resignation letter from our treasurer. Nancy Talbot's done a lot for this town in the last 5 years? Many years that she's,
8 years.
And really helped us dig out of the hole with a lot of things like the foreclosures and the thing that she's really been working on, as well as working through a tough period after a previous treasurer collector office. She had to kind of step in and really try to get us back on track and work hard to help us find our way back out of that. And it's obviously still not resolved, but she's done a lot to help us. Her letter did say that she would stick with the town to get through October, so she's not leaving right away, thankfully, which will help us with the transition. So that's going to be 2 very critical spots that in the next 3 months we need to fill with some good people, because we're just losing 2/3 of that entire office, and that's not going to be easy. So that's where we're at today. Just got that notice today, so I don't want it to sound like we've had any chance to speak to her. I don't know enough. I just know that she's given her notice, and we'll see where it goes from there.
See, and this is all administrative stuff that you guys know, but is there any reason in one department that you're losing such a significant experienced crew? Is there anything that the town of Barry isn't doing or should be doing or is acting differently where departments just up and leave, or are these folks moving to Eastern California, and is there something we should know about as a town, I guess?
I don't know. We haven't had a chance to do an exit interview. Jessica Crawford did note, I believe she either noted or somehow I had heard through a different channel that she actually was able to step up in her career at another town. So she wasn't making a lateral move, she was making a career advancement in her move. So I can't say that had anything to do with anything here other than it was an opportunity and she was able to take it. I haven't had a chance to speak to Nancy, so I don't want to speak on that.
Because I've dealt with that department, they seem to, from my deal, they seem to be working like a well-oiled clock.
They do a good job, and they, despite the difficult job you have to ask a treasurer to do when it comes to collecting taxes, and, well, treasurer collector, I think she always showed that she really cared about how it affected the different members of the community, and at least that's how I always felt. I mean, she had a job to do. Not everybody was going to feel that when she said it's time to pay your bill, but she cared. And I know she talked to us about things when it came to budget season and what she thought it, and how it would affect people. So it made a big difference to me to know that how much she cared and what she tried to put into it. So other than that, we have an executive session per MGL Chapter 30A, Exemption 21, well, Section 21A, Exemption 3, to discuss strategy with respect to a legal matter between the Commonwealth and a Ms. Langelier. We will be going into executive session, and when we return, we will be not returning to open session. We will be closing the meeting from there.
By the way, I didn't hear it, I guess. Did you approve the common license for Weenie's?
We approved it.
Oh, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, we approved it, but we said still have the building inspector go down and make sure they do it right.
No, I just didn't know. I didn't know that if you took into account the unsigned letter, the anonymous letter. I didn't know if that was a
I took it into account.
Component of the decisions. That's all.
It's more about not trying to shut someone down so they can't earn the income necessary to fix the things necessary. So let's go figure out how big of an issue it is before we say something more. If it's a big enough issue, they'll still get a letter from the building department saying you're shut down. So I'll let Brianna be the bad girl.
Well, I was at Honey Farms pumping gas, and a car from New York came in, and this woman ran out of the car heading for the building. She turns around, comes back with the car, she says there's no public restrooms. So I told her that over by the tents there were porta potties, and she was very grateful, and she went over there. Just for the information.
Thank you much. Thank you.
Nice meeting.
I'll make a motion, we go into
You want
executive
this door
session.
closed when we leave?
Yeah, there's a latch on the back.
Oh yeah, gosh,
Thanks a lot, Ellie.
nobody's gonna get out
We
of
need
this
a,
thing.
we-